Hello, folks. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. Big guest today, Scott Ritter, will join us. Thank you so much for being here. Click thumbs up, click share, click subscribe, all those good things. We just passed 13 million views, even though we're woefully suppressed. And this is the newer YouTube channel after the old one was banned around the world. But thank you for being here. After I chat with Scott Ritter, I will be discussing Trump's new criminalization of leftism, but also of being anti-capitalist. So let that be a message to everybody. Do not criticize capitalism. All right, it's a problem. Okay, it's going to be a problem. Don't criticize our holiest of holies, capitalism. Don't you dare. But before we get to that and other news coming up after I talk with Scott, but first up, let me speak with former UN weapons inspector. He's also been to Russia many times. He back when he was a weapons inspector, he was working with the Russians on many issues, and he knows a lot about Russia. He knows a lot about Iran, which I will also speak to him about. And because of his schedule, I had to talk to him 1 hour ago. So here is my half-hour interview with Scott Ritter. Hope you enjoy it, and I will be back with more right after the interview as well. See you then. Hey, Scott. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to talk to you again. It's been a little while, and I want to get updates on everything Russia, Ukraine, proxy war, and Iran as well. But before we get to that, I actually haven't spoken to you since your home was raided by the FBI. I was wondering if you can quickly say how that's going and whether there's any residual effects. Have they told you why? Anything?
Well, when they came to the door, they made it clear that they were accusing me of violating the Foreign Agent Registration Act. They believed that I was operating as an agent of the Russian government, an unregistered agent of the Russian government. And I told them, I said, it's curious because as somebody who's familiar with the law, first of all, there is no crime unless I willfully fail to register. And the willfulness can't come until the U.S. government has made a case that I have failed to register, that I should register. And normally that case is made not by 40 FBI agents coming down, kicking down the door, serving a search warrant, but through a letter from the FAR Enforcement Division of the Department of Justice that says, hey, these are some things that you're doing that we're concerned about. We'd like some clarification, et cetera. So I said, I called BS right off the bat. I said, you're not here for FAR. You're here to intimidate. You're here. It's bullshit. I said, excuse my language. I said, what's your they showed me the search warrant. I said, where's the the affidavit of probable cause, the one that you showed the judge to say this? Yeah. It's classified. Oh, really? It's classified. I wonder why that is. What about what what you're taking electronics? What about that affidavit that says these are the things we have to seize, and this is why we believe we have to seize them. This is what we believe we will find when we seize this. Oh, that's classified too. You can't have that. So you're just going to come into my house with 40 freaking agents and tear the whole place apart because what? And that was the whole thing. And it was just purely intimidation tactics. They seized computers. They went downstairs. The computers I immediately replaced. So I'm like, screw you. You're not shutting me down. I told them that. I said, if you guys don't understand, you picked the wrong Marine. See, I actually believe in the Constitution. I'll defend the Constitution of life. And the First Amendment is an important part of the Constitution, not just freedom of speech, but I'm a journalist. And that means freedom of the press. That means you don't get to come and do what you're doing, and yet you're doing it anyways. But they also went downstairs and started going through documents and such. And what they ended up seizing my my archive of documents from my time as a weapons inspector in Iraq. The archive that gave me the receipts that allowed me to stand up to the world and say there were no WMD in Iraq. And when they said, how do you know? It's because I did the job for 7.5 years. I was the intelligence officer, and I have the receipts of it. They took that too. So they stole the truth.
And so you never got any of that back?
They came to my house in early August, I guess, late July, early August, with a small box. And they said, here, we're starting to return some stuff. I said, well, thank you very much. They also said that, there was an election and that priorities have changed. And, and left that hanging, implying, of course, that it was purely political. And it was. I mean, I when they were here, I didn't ask for a lawyer. They were like, you want a lawyer? I said, no, don't want a lawyer. I said, am I being accused of a crime? They said, no, we're just executing a search warrant with 40 FBI agents, including a 7-man SWAT team, fully armed, fully armored, M16s, the whole thing, right? A bomb squad, everything. Yeah. The treatment. They flew a drone over my house. I feel honored that they spent millions of dollars of American taxpayer money just to try and intimidate a man who can't be intimidated. But I told them
that's the full intimidation special right there.
It is. They didn't come early in the morning. They didn't use a flashbang. I don't think they were able to convince the judge that I was, a threat of that nature. But they came nonetheless. But I told them when they were here, I said, you can't leave until all your questions are asked. I said, I'm not providing any obstacles. I'm not asking for a lawyer. I'm answering every question openly. But what I won't tolerate is you coming in here, kicking up the dust and then leaving, and then walking away with any implication that I somehow didn't fully cooperate or you don't understand what was going on. We couldn't figure it out. Every question must be asked and every question will be answered. And they spent 5.5 hours questioning me. And every once in a while they pause, the two special agents, and they'd look at each other. I said, the mere fact that you pause, see, they forgot that I used to do this for a living. God, what did I, it's like they didn't read my bio. I know all the games. Yeah. I helped do the games at one time, not as a federal guy, but, what do you think I did to the Iraqis when I interviewed them, when I interrogated them? I know all the tricks. And I saw them pause and look at each other. And the mere fact that you pause and you're looking at each other implies that there's a question you have there, but you don't know whether or not you should ask it. And I'm here to tell you right now, because I'm making a statement, a formal statement. I want it to appear in your interview documentation, that I'm asking you to ask the question that you want to ask, but you're not asking. And eventually they opened up the folder and they showed me emails. You see, they've been monitoring my emails for over 2.5 years. And they've been monitoring my phone calls for over 2. I knew it. Come on, I'm not stupid. I know the game. I know how it works. And so they showed me emails, and I said, they said, this is why we're asking. I said, is this the whole email chain that you have? They said, yeah. And I said, well, this is why you guys are so stupid, because you see, you only took the email chain coming from the Russian embassy in. Because see, I went to visit the ambassador. Right. To have an interview with the ambassador, to ask questions about Russophobia and the Russian opinion on Russophobia and how Russophobia affects U.S.-Russian relations. These are sort of things that the American people should be aware of. Yeah. And they were looking at the response of the embassy. And so their implication was, you're taking direction from the embassy. I said, really? There's a whole email you're missing. I'll direct you to it on the computer you just seized. And that's the email where I write the Russian embassy saying, I am a journalist requesting a meeting with the Russian ambassador to talk about Russophobia. You see, nobody directs me. Many people would like to, including my wife, and she often thinks she is in charge, and she is, but I'm hard to direct. And I can guarantee you that no foreign government will ever direct me. And even if, when working for the U.S. government, directing me was tough, because you got to explain why you want something done, especially when you establish rules and procedures that imply that what you're asking me to do shouldn't be done. But the FBI was just all over the place wrong. And so they had sort of admitted that this was all political. But then they said that not only have priorities changed, but with priorities comes resources. And they said that they had seized a lot of material. I said, I know. That they seized over 1 million pages of documents, over 1 million pages. Many of them, one of them was a book that I was about to publish. They seized the only electronic manuscript of that. Thank you, FBI. And they seized 2 articles that I was about to publish. Again, the only electronic copies of that. Thank you, FBI. Wow. But they also seized, everything I've ever written. including all the memorandums I wrote when I was a weapons inspector, 7.5 years. I'm pumping out multiple memorandums a day. So they have over 1 million pages of things they have to read. Now they only have 2 guys to read them. So this is going to take a long time.
And they don't like reading to begin with. So,
well, I will say that the guy who apparently was the lead reader said, first of all, he said, "God, you write a lot." I said, "Well, I am a writer." But then he said, "It's pretty interesting what you write. It's fascinating, but I have to read it all." I'm like, "Well,
oh my God.
Sorry to be you. You could ask me for the synopsis, which is nothing illegal happened here. Therefore, this is none of your frickin' business." But that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
You know, my wife believes it could be a scam, that they, they're just playing games, and they set you up for a false. I don't care. As I've said all along, a scam to what end? I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And if they want a constitutional fight, I'm ready. I mean, I'm not afraid of this.
Yeah. It's amazing they put that kind of resources into what seems to be an effort just to scare you to shut up. But anyway, I don't want to use up all our time on that. Just the other day, Trump pulled, and no one ever knows what Trump's going to say day to day, but he pulled a complete 180, it seemed, on the proxy war in Ukraine, and announced that Russia is a paper tiger, and that the Ukraine can win all of its territory back and maybe more. And and this is after his, he had a meeting a month ago or whatever with Putin, where he was saying almost the reverse. They each needed to give up some things at the peace negotiations, and Ukraine's it needs to sit down. And so, what do you make of this? And do you have any insight into what is going on here? What you think might actually be playing out?
Trying to read President Trump's brain is like trying to, decipher truth out of multiple cups of coffee that are turned upside down. And then you look at the thing. I mean, who knows what's going on there? I let facts speak for themselves. And what I mean by facts is reality, what's actually happening, as opposed to words.
Mm-hmm.
We know the following. We know that President Trump has acknowledged that the conflict in Ukraine was far more complicated when it comes to conflict resolution than he possibly thought, than he could have possibly have imagined. He has acknowledged it's not as easy as he thought it was. 2, we know that the Trump administration wants to detangle itself from European entanglements. And Ukraine is the biggest, baddest entanglement of them all. And so you have to underscore everything by realizing that Trump doesn't want to get America deeper into this conflagration. He wants to withdraw us. That's his strategic intent. But then we also have to recognize that Donald Trump lives in a universe populated by people, organization, entities that want a bigger war with Ukraine, and are putting a lot of pressure on Donald Trump to stay in, to double down. And so Trump is very good at saying things to appease people that are supposed to be his allies. And so this is what he's done. If you think about it, he had a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky, working on behalf of the British, has concocted this massive con about Ukrainian counteroffensive, and Ukraine is beating the Russians, and if we just get the resources necessary, we can do all this. And Trump sat down, and on the surface, looks like he fell for the con. I mean, because he said, "My God, you guys are winning. The Russians are losing. You go forth, take all your territory back. Take it all back. What? Why stop there? Go on to Moscow. You got it, Volodymyr." And Volodymir's like, "Yeah." And when you listen to Volodymyr tell the story of this, he says that Trump's using terms Ruskies. He's calling them Ruskies. Them Ruskies. I imagine if Trump could possibly have done that. Why? Because he's just playing a game with Zelensky. Because what happened is Trump told Zelensky to go forth and conquer. And then he said, and we'll sell some weapons to NATO if they're willing to pay for them. And NATO can decide what they want to do with those weapons, but there's nothing else coming your way. And Zelensky's like, "What?
Right.
You just told me to go fight the bully then I'm supposed to have your help fighting the bully, and now I have to fight the bully by myself. Yeah. See, that's what happened. And Europe gets it. Kaja Kallas, the Estonian foreign minister, who's now the head of the European Union's foreign ministry thing, she came out and just said, Trump has abandoned Ukraine, washed his hands of Ukraine. And that's exactly what Trump did, washed his hands of Ukraine. And it's up to Europe, she said, now to stand up and do it. And we don't have the resources to do this. We can't do this without the United States. That's what's happening here. Look at Keith Kellogg. I mean, he goes and gets a great medal from Zelensky, got to suck up. And then he sits there and he says, Donald Trump is, he's committed to, giving Ukrainians permission to use long-range weapons, and we're going to sell them Tomahawk missiles. And everybody's like, whoa, that's a game changer. Except that's not what Trump said. Even J.D. Vance said, Ukraine came to us with a number of requests, and we're considering them. And one of those requests was Tomahawk missiles. I can promise you that the United States government will never deliver an intermediate range nuclear capable missile to the Ukrainians. We have provided them to the British because they are a nuclear ally, but we're not going to give it to the Ukrainians. It would violate everything and bring the wrath of Russia down, meaning that we would have a nuclear war with Russia. So it's not going to happen. And Trump hasn't approved it. And everybody needs to calm down because he won't approve it. He can't approve it. The Tomahawk uses as guidance 3 systems that only the United States has control of. So for the Ukrainians to use a Tomahawk means America's targeting it. And if we target the weapon we gave them, it's nuclear capable. When it's launched, the Russians have a right to assume it's nuclear capable, and they will launch a nuclear retaliatory strike. And Trump doesn't want a nuclear war. Remember what I said early on. He wants out of Europe, not in Europe. So there's just a whole bunch of nonsense being thrown out there. I'll give you another example of nonsense. Trump has approved the sale of 3,200 extended range attack missiles, ERAMs. And everybody's like, oh my God, that's it. Ukraine's going to have 3,200 extended range attack missiles. They go 720 kilometers in. Moscow's toast. And then you read the small print. The prime manufacturer, contractor, currently has a $34 million contract that is due next month, October, a couple of days, to produce one prototype. That's it. Prototype. And so they'll produce the prototype. Now the prototype has to be evaluated, et cetera, and then it has to go into production. Understand that a contractor isn't going to produce something on speculation, meaning that Europe has to put down the $825 million up front, and then the contractor builds the factory space, hires the people, gets the equipment, and begins the production. The RAM is designed max production rate 1,000 per year. They haven't even gone through the prototype state yet, so calm down, people. But even if they do, to get 3,200, and let's say just optimistically production starts in December. That's very optimistic because that's now how defense contractors work. But that means in December of 2026, Ukraine could receive 1,000. In 2027, 1,000 more. 2028, 1,000 more. 2029, the remaining 200. There won't be Ukraine by then. Everything Trump is doing is smoke and mirrors. The bottom line is Trump has washed his hands of this. And the biggest indication of that is when Lavrov met with Marco Rubio in New York this past week. The readout from the Russian foreign ministry was the foreign minister met the American Secretary of State. They picked up where they left off in Alaska, and Ukraine was never mentioned. Really? That means that they're talking about normalization relations, doing better business, Arctic deals, the whole thing. They're not talking about Ukraine because Trump just washed his hands of Ukraine.
So then, as you said, what really matters is action. So what is the truth on the ground right now in Ukraine, and assuming this ends with a Russian victory, where it seems to be headed, how long do you think that takes? What exactly is happening?
Well, let me answer that last part first. I'm not touching predictive analysis with a 9-foot pole because the Russians have just made a strategic decision that's been sustained throughout that they don't attach a calendar to outcomes. They are outcome driven. That's it. I'll tell you how I believe this will end, and I believe I'll be very accurate. But as to when that happens, ain't touching that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it involves things that I'm not in control of.
Too many variables.
And logically, the Russians have a different drumbeat operating here that brings in a whole bunch of factors that, my military mind doesn't normally take into account. Look, if this was a Marine Corps operation, I'd be slaughtering Ukrainians by the day, deep penetrated operations, take out their government command and control, roll through that country and kill everybody. And we'd win the war. We'd lose a lot of guys, but we'd win the war. We'd build a big monument to ourselves in Washington, D.C., and people could come and look at the Marines raising the flag over, Mount Kiev. But, that's how we are. That's just not how the Russians are operating. This is not a war. This is a special military operation, which means there's a whole bunch of politics at play. And Russian domestic politics and Russian foreign policy politics are two things that, as an American outsider, those are difficult to delve into. And then you combine them to military reality and link in it, and it's it's Russian juju that I don't try to decipher. But what I can say is this: on the battlefield, Russia enjoys the strategic advantage across the board. There's no place that Russia doesn't enjoy an advantage, from manpower to equipment to defense industry, etc. We also have to acknowledge that Ukraine is not a functioning sovereign state, especially when it comes to its military. Ukraine is nothing more than a proxy of the collective West, of NATO. This is a NATO army fighting in Ukraine right now. And without the support of NATO and the United States, this army would not exist and Ukraine would not exist. So we also have to remember that this isn't Russia versus Ukraine. This is Russia versus the collective West. And the Russian government is all about acknowledge that. Yeah. The British play a very big role in driving the information operations that are attached to Ukrainian military operations, because this is one big con game. It's a massive con. The goal here is to continue to con the West into believing that the Ukrainians can achieve an outcome that weakens Russia. Nobody in the West believes that Zelensky's going to retake the 2000 or 1991 borders and all that, but everybody's hopeful that he can exhaust Russia, wear Russia down, get a freeze in the conflict, and get a Korea-type situation where you permanently trap the Russians into this unfinished war that's just going to bankrupt them militarily, fiscally, and politically. That's the hope. So in order to keep people pouring good money after bad because the Ukrainians are getting whipped, the Ukrainians have to carry out a con, and they did that. In the lead up to the General Assembly, which was their moment of truth when they were going to meet with the president, because the president wasn't going to meet with them. The only way Zelensky was getting a meeting with this president is when they were both in the same space at the same time, which made the General Assembly the logical time to get it. So they began an operation in Pokrovsk, north of Pokrovsk, where the Russians had done an advance, a surge north. And what the Ukrainians did is seek to do a classic counterattack to nip that advance in the bud. They brought in forces trained by the West, equipped by the West, backed up by Western intelligence. And then they did what I guess is the equivalent of a drone swarm. They basically, massed a horrific, tremendous amount of drones in that area to create a drone wall. And they carried out a counterattack, and it appears to be a successful counterattack. They appear to have recaptured some villages to push the Russians back and to inflict casualties on the Russians. Hey, welcome to War 101. It happens all the time. What I try to tell people is don't read too much into this, because counterattacks are just a natural part of war. It's like counterpunching in a boxing match. As a Marine, I was trained. If I'm capturing a hill, the moment I take the hill, I have to consolidate my Marines to prepare for the inevitable counterattack, because the weakest point for me after my attack is the fact that I have troops scattered. I don't know who has ammo, who doesn't. I haven't locked everybody in, and the enemy can exploit this uncertainty by counterattack and throwing me back off the hill. And likewise, if I'm defending a position and the enemy's attacking me, I will withdraw from the position, consolidate, and immediately counterpunch and counterattack. It happens. The Battle of Berlin, at the end of the war, Soviets were going to win this thing no matter what. Up until the last day, the Germans were launching counterattacks. And many of those counterattacks were locally successful, because a counterattack means that you have assembled forces for a specific point in time. And generally speaking, if you're the one doing the attacking, you can achieve localized superiority. So the Ukrainians have assembled forces, localized place and time, and launched a counterattack designed to create the impression of the inevitability of Ukrainian victory over Russia. And so they've gone in, they've taken photographs, they've done things that can be seen by satellite imagery, that can be shown to the president, because the president says, I've seen the evidence of the Ukrainian successes. Of course you have, because Ukraine put everything into this. And, you're seeing prisoners of war, dead Russians, destroyed Russian equipment. It happens. But eventually the Ukrainians can't sustain this because this is a con. Normally, you don't want to carry out a counterattack that uses all of your forces, because then you become depleted. Then the enemy counterattacks and it pushes you back, and usually pushes you back further. So this is where we're at now. It's a Pokrov scam. It's a con. The Ukrainians, again, have put a lot of resources into this. Russia will adapt. Russia has superior resources. Russia will make the appropriate adjustments. And then Russia will impose itself on the battlefield, drive the Ukrainians back, and continue to advance in the Pokrovsk region. This happens every time the Ukrainians do one of these localized surges of forces to stop the Russians. The Russians just move around. For the pro-Russian people out there, it's not ever easy to see, look at the Battle of the Bulge, 1944. America, landed at Normandy. We did the big sweep across Paris. We're kicking the Germans' butts. Things are looking good. It's Christmas. We're going to be home in time to celebrate the holidays. And the Germans said, no, sorry, we're counterattacking. And they put all their resources together, and they punched a hole through the Ardennes forest, and they made us have a bad month. And we lost some guys. We lost a lot of equipment. But what happened? The Germans couldn't sustain it. We consolidated. We counterattacked. We pushed them back. And now the Germans have depleted all their reserves. This is what will inevitably happen to the Ukrainians. Ukraine has lost this war across the board. They're engaged in acts of desperation. Look at how everything came together, at this time in the General Assembly. The whole drone thing. Why? Because Ukraine needs NATO to intervene to save their air defense. In order to say that, Ukraine manufactures a Russian drone attack against Poland to get NATO to wake up to the drone threat, so that Ukraine can begin training NATO resources on how to engage Russian drones and missiles, in hopes that one day that NATO capability will be surged for into Western Ukraine. The same what's going on. They need to shut down the Russian shadow fleet, the one that's shipping all that oil out there that's helping Russia pay for the war, according to the Western calculations. And the Baltic nations made an effort of seizing the tanker, but Russia now escorts them with military vessels. So nobody's seeking to seize these ships. So what's happened now is another false flag. Drones are suddenly flying all over, Denmark and
Denmark.
Denmark. There's something happening in Denmark. Hamlet.
Because what exactly purpose would it serve for Russia to just have drones in Denmark's airspace, just to piss them off?
None. But it's being done in a way, because I guess there's going to be a meeting of I don't know, the either EU or the G20. Somebody's meeting in Denmark sometime soon, and so the idea is that this now is a security threat. And so Zelensky comes out and says it's the shadow fleet. The Russians are using the shadow fleet as the motherships to launch these drones, and therefore you must seize the shadow fleet. I mean, this is this is all British driven. These are all scripts written by the MI6 out of London, and Zelensky is a great actor, and he's playing his role. It's just not going to manifest itself the way Zelensky says it is. It's literally it's over. Russia is winning this war, will win this war. And if they continue to fool around, NATO and Ukraine are about to find out, because Russia has far more capability than they've exercised to date. They're showing a whole bunch of restraint. And I think the gloves are about to come off.
I have one last question, if we can squeeze it in here. I want to shift gears to another country you know very well, Iran. We saw the 12-day war between Iran and Israel and the United States, and Israel and the U.S. succeeded at taking out many of their some of their military higher ups. And Iran, I guess, had some successes as well with penetrating inside Israel. But where do things stand now, in your opinion? Could we see another one of these pop off tomorrow, or have the power dynamics changed?
that's a political decision. And so when we talk about power dynamics, sometimes reality doesn't matter. It's what perceptions are. Perception creates its own reality.
Yeah.
And the other thing is political imperatives. What are you willing to risk to gain something? When you're talking about, Bibi Netanyahu, this is about his existential survival, not just political survival, but his survival as a human being. Once he is removed as prime minister, he's going to jail, straight to jail,
Right.
where he will rot for the rest of his life because he's a criminal. He is one of the more corrupt people that's ever occupied the position of prime minister of Israel, and he knows this, so he has to keep this conflict going. But here's the problem. There's two problems. One, the excuse for the conflict, the concept of Iran being a nuclear nation seeking nuclear weapons, a nuclear capable nation. There's no more International Atomic Energy Agency inspections, which are mandated by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the safeguards inspections. Why? Well, because the IAEA, these inspectors, ended up passing intelligence they were gathering about Iran's nuclear facilities and scientists to Israel and the United States so that we could launch attacks to kill these people. So they're just not trusted for good reason.
Right.
Two, the 60% enriched uranium, which is permitted under the safeguards regime, not permitted under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the 2015 nuclear deal. But hey, the United States withdrew from that, and Europe never fully complied with it. So why are we talking about those? Because it constrains Iran. You see, we can constrain Iran even if we don't live up to our obligations. But that deal's dead. The 60% hasn't been accounted for, which means there's a potential that if Iran takes certain centrifuge cascade configurations, they could create fissile material, highly enriched uranium, capable of producing 3 to 5 to 10 bombs. So there's that threat there. And even though we destroyed some of their enrichment capacity, the fact is we didn't destroy it all. So there's that same underlying concern about a nuclear armed Iran is there, which means that Israel and the United States have, on the face of things, a legitimate reason to attack Iran if they wanted to. The problem is they didn't beat Iran last time. They hit them with their Sunday punch. They killed a bunch of guys, but they were shocked how quickly Iran replaced those people and got back in the saddle and started, playing ball. And Israel hit Iran with everything they had except nuclear weapons. I mean, the Mossad unveiled a decades-long covert operation to build drone farms inside Iran. They were used to take out air defense, assassinate people, etc. You only get to use that once, and it didn't work. They also, got Azerbaijan to open up their airspace so that the Israeli Air Force could fly into the Caspian Sea and hit Tehran from the undefended side of the city. That's not going to ever happen again. So Israel did their best. They did everything they could, and they didn't get the Iranians. The Iranians, on the other hand, not only recovered, but began attacking Israel. It was Israel that picked up the phone to call Donald Trump in a panic that said, you have to stop this war. If it continues, we're beat. The Iranians were not stopping their missiles. Their missiles are starting to hit places that hurt. And if they keep coming at us, we could be defeated. And so that's when Trump, cooked up his little, scheme. Look, the Iranians agreed to ending this war too, because they had been hurt too. It's not like they weren't hurt. I mean, they got hit hard. Yeah. And it was pain. So they were looking for a way to get out of this conflict too. So Trump came in with his, we'll bomb you, you'll missile us, and then we call it a day and we walk away. The problem is Israel hasn't done anything to improve their defenses, meaning they're still as vulnerable today as they were when the war, and the Iranians have improved their missile capability, built new missiles. They have a whole bunch of missiles Israel hasn't seen yet. And the Iranians, on the other hand, in addition to building up their missiles, they now have fighters from Russia, from China. They have radars. They have missiles. They know what the Israelis did, and the Israelis will never get to come in from the Caspian Sea again. And we're also learning things about, the actual part of the war. The assumption was the Israelis had freedom of the skies. But what we're finding out is that many Israeli attacks, especially near the end of the war, were thwarted by an Iranian air force that was still up and flying. And, in order to launch some of these missiles, the Israelis have to fly, an attack profile within the range of the missiles. And once the Iranians figured out, where the Israelis were operating, they would approach with their air force and start to lock on. So the Israelis would have to break off their attacks because the Iranian Air Force was moving in, disrupting. So I don't think Israel's in a hurry to have another go around with the Iranians. The Iranians are ready. They're prepared. They don't want a war, but they recognize that if there is going to be a war, they need to, do everything. But here's the good news, and this comes straight from the Iranian president himself, who I had the honor and privilege of meeting last week. Iran's not looking for. Iran isn't not just trying to build a bomb. They don't want a bomb. The decision has been made not just by the religious authority, which is the ultimate decider in Iran, but by the Iranian government. Iran doesn't want a nuclear bomb. They view a nuclear bomb as counterproductive.
I had heard this, that religiously they view obliterating that many innocent people as anathema to everything they believe. So there have not actually been true efforts to create a bomb.
Right, but there's people, including inside Iran, who are saying, yeah, but the game's changed. Now Israel's trying to destroy us and all this kind of stuff, and we need to change the religious thing. And the religious authority said, no, we're not changing it. But the political people, too, said, we don't want a bomb. We don't need a bomb. Actually, possessing a bomb would make us weaker than we are right now. Without a bomb, we're deterring Israel with our missiles, our conventional missiles. We can destroy Israel with our missiles. Bringing a bomb in only invites nuclear weapons being used against us. So we don't want a bomb. We don't want to have the ability to build a bomb. And they're willing to put their 60% enriched uranium on the table right now. They can dilute it down to 20% and drop it down to 3.5%, which is usable into nuclear fuel. It's not a problem to dilute it. And they're ready to do that. But in order to do that, the world has to accept Iran as a nation permitted under Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of having a uranium enrichment program. In the United States and Israel saying there could be no uranium enrichment program, and Iran's never going to agree to that.
Thank you so much, Scott. You give me more than enough time. I really appreciate it, and always learn a lot when I speak to you. So.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I wish you the best of luck going forward, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. There it is. 1 hour ago, my conversation with Scott Ritter. Hope you enjoyed that. But I got plenty more to cover on this show. We're going to get into the deal that Trump claims has just been approved by Netanyahu for Gaza. And yeah, I don't know whether to believe anything that ever comes out of that man's face or Netanyahu's face or any of their faces or any other holes that they may be putting forward plans and agreements. But we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Trump's new efforts to make being left-wing illegal, but also just anti-capitalist illegal. So let's get into that. But real quick, I'm offering, for those of you who do not watch the show every day, you might not yet know this, I'm offering a free month to anyone who signs up at leecamp.net. Free month. After that, it's $6, but you can cancel before that and never pay a dime. So free month at leecamp.net, and you get my newer ebook, Dangerous Ideas, for free when you sign up. That's all at leecamp.net. Just go over there, scroll down to become a supporter, and then use promo code LeeCamp in all caps. Sorry, LeeCamp free in all caps. One word. Go to leecamp.net, click become a supporter. Then when you're checking out, use promo code, or maybe it's called coupon code, whatever. LeeCamp free, all caps, one word, and that will get you a free month of my Locals page, Locals community. You get extra segments, you get my ebook, you get all kinds of shit, and you're supporting this show. So I hope you'll do that. Also, quick note that this show is also a podcast. It's called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. Every other platform, it's called Moment of Clarity. That has to do with the fact that Spotify banned me for no reason. So anyway, let's keep going, though. And I'll bring you a little update on this, but with a lot of these plans, I like to see whether they actually happen, whether, it's because it often ends up just being loads of bullshit. But Trump has just said this, like as of an hour ago, that Netanyahu has agreed to his 20-point plan. It was a 21-point plan. Apparently, a point has been dropped. Not sure what that point could have been that was dropped. Maybe it was that Trump gets a whole a live pig delivered to his office every Wednesday as part of the plan. And that aspect of the 21-point plan has been dropped. So now we're down to 20. Anyway, he says, I'm hearing Hamas wants to get it done. Trump also said Trump is praising Netanyahu. Of course, why not praise a bloodthirsty genocidal maniac? Because he's your friend and buddy and you're genociding together. Thank you, 11th Hour, for supporting the show. Really appreciate it. I do not frown upon Super Chats, all right? Super Chats help this show, God damn it. But he has also said, let's see, that the Arab world is supporting this plan as well. Oh, also, Netanyahu, by the way, for those of you concerned about this, Netanyahu has just apologized for bombing Qatar. So when he bombed Qatar in an attempt to kill several Hamas leaders, he said he's sorry. He didn't mean to bomb a U.S. ally that Israel is supposedly not at war with. And you know, that apology just means everything. It means the world, okay? It means the world. Bomb whoever you like, but just say sorry, okay? Can you please say sorry afterwards? Here's a little bit of what's in that 20-point plan that supposedly is being agreed upon, but I am rather doubtful as to all these things Trump says that never end up being even remotely true. Creates a pathway to a Palestinian state, a future roadmap for Gaza. The plan demands the release of the 20 living hostages in Gaza and a number of those who are already deceased. That should happen within 48 hours of when the agreement is struck. Once all the hostages have been released, Israel will release 250 prisoners serving life sentences, plus 1,700 Gazans detained after October 7th. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release another 15 Gazans. The plan, and by the way, I have no idea why anyone would believe any of this. Like, why would anyone sign a deal with Netanyahu and the United States when they have proven that they will not hold up their end of any agreement that's ever signed? And I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But this says that if Hamas surrenders all the remaining living hostages, then the rest of this plan will happen. Don't know why they'd ever trust that. But the plan also demands the removal of Hamas, recognized as a terrorist organization by the German government, the EU, and the US. Oh, really? Really? Well, they're not biased at all, right? From power, and a commitment from it to disarm, reform the Palestinian Authority, and a promise from Israel not to launch any further attacks on Qatar. Other points include Gaza receiving an economic plan for growth, a security guarantee for Gaza enforced by the U.S. and regional powers, because you always trust the U.S. Listen, with the U.S., our word is our bond, and we never break it, except for always ever. And also the chance for people who have left Gaza to return if they so choose. Also, no one will be forced to leave Gaza. This all sounds... They just did a big news conference saying this is going to happen, or they think it's going to happen. I don't know why anyone would trust Trump and Netanyahu. Furthermore, it seems quite like, if I had to guess, like if this thing were actually signed and it actually goes forward and actually the next steps going to happen, here would be my guess as to what would happen. It would be signed. Hamas surrenders remaining hostages. Israel maybe releases a bunch of Gazan hostages, because Israel, let's remember, has 10,000 Palestinians or more. It's probably more as hostages right now. And, you know, maybe Israel releases a bunch. And then at that point, when all these other steps are supposed to happen, Hamas is going to disarm and Israel won't ever do anything again. And anyone can leave or come back. All that stuff, Israel just does what they want. Israel, I don't know, invades, attacks, bombs, kills, whatever. But they have the remaining living hostages. And the U.S., meanwhile, has behind closed doors has told Israel, at that point, you do what you want, but we're going to pretend we didn't know. And so Trump goes, Israel's acting crazy. And that's how I see this deal going. Because I don't know why. And the other thing is Netanyahu needs endless war, right? The moment this war ends, he'll be kicked out of office because it'll no longer be a war state in Israel. And then Netanyahu gets imprisoned for his corruption, which he's already, been charged with. And so he needs essentially endless war. So that's yet another reason that I don't see this happening, but who knows? I'd love to see no more fucking people murdered. That would be just like awesome. That would be just toads cool, as the kids no longer say anymore. All right, I want to get to Chris Hedges' piece on Trump's. It's about Trump's new efforts to make it illegal to be left-wing, but also illegal to be anti-capitalist, and to really implement a fascist Christian nationalist state. That's what this movement is toward. Chris Hedges' piece is called Trump's War on America. And here's what he said. Fascists historically are surprisingly candid about the world they intend to create. The most ominous warning to date from our homegrown fascists is the latest presidential memo. Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence is what it's titled. It accuses any critic of law enforcement, ICE, the American empire, capitalism, the Christian right, the persecution of immigrants, and those that decry discrimination based on race and gender, as well as those who question white male patriarchy, described as, quote, traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. It accuses anyone who's critical of all that of fomenting violent revolution. So the way that you get liberals to act like this is not a big deal and to back down and just to be the absolute doormats that liberals are in America is to say, oh no, we're only going after violent extremists. Well, what is defined as violent extremists? Oh, anyone who's critical of basically anything that Trump likes. And they use careful wording. They say anyone who's critical of traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. Now, that sounds nice, right? But what they mean by traditional is a man controlling a woman who is a trad wife who lives in the kitchen. She could choose to be barefoot. She does not have to be barefoot. They'll allow her to have some comfy house slippers of some sort. So, there are some caveats, some perks in here, okay? With being the trad wife, you do nowadays get those house slippers. Before, fucking no slippers anywhere to be seen, okay? So let's not act like we haven't advanced in this country. Those house slippers are, you ever walked in some of those? They're fucking heaven, I tell you. But yeah, so basically, if you're critical of any of those things that I just listed, it counts as fomenting violent revolution. So roughly, I'm going to give a percentage, 99.6% of everything this show has ever said would be considered fomenting violent revolution. And therefore, illegal under Trump's new memo. The memo, typical of the self-serving narratives favored by Trump, ignores because it talks about left-wing violence, such as the killing of Charlie Kirk, which by everything I've seen is not a violent left-winger, but whatever. Even if it were, there's a tiny minuscule number of left-wing violent attacks compared to right-wing violent attacks in this country. But anyway, the memo, typically of the self-serving narratives of Trump, ignores the murder of a Christian nationalist of Democratic Minnesota, by a Christian nationalist of Democratic Minnesota state legislator and Speaker of the Minnesota House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the attempted murder of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. I'm sure it also leaves out the attack on Nancy Pelosi and her husband, taking a hammer to his head and fracturing his skull, and many others. But anyway, the memo brazenly inverts the rule of law. Also, they like to point to the assassination attempts on Donald Trump as proof of other left-wing attacks, even though the guy that, hit Trump's ear, there's no proof that he was a left-winger. Instead, he seemed like he literally had looked up ways to shoot at various politicians, including Biden. So the idea that he was some kind of left-winger, they've brought forward no evidence of that. The memo brazenly inverts the rule of law. It turns the law into an instrument of injustice. It uses the decorum of federal agencies, the courts, and trials to legalize state crimes. It is grounded in magical thinking, bizarre conspiracy theories, and a paranoia that sees the most tepid acts of dissent or criticism as treason. Universal innocence. Alexander, gonna have trouble with this one. Writes in the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn says in the Gulag Archipelago, also gave rise to the universal failure to act. Maybe they won't take you. Maybe it will all blow over. The majority sit quietly and dare to hope. Since you aren't guilty, then how can they arrest you? It's a mistake. Yeah, it is interesting that people think they can't be, still to this day, think they can't be arrested when they're innocent. Look at Julian Assange. You could absolutely be arrested when you're innocent. Happens all the time. Mumia Abu-Jamal, for one. The idea that, and every whistleblower that has ever revealed the truth about the U.S. empire, although some of them are just assassinated, so you don't have to bother with arresting them. But Chris Hedges continues, totalitarian regimes promulgate broad security decrees from Stalin's Article 70 to the Nazis' Malicious Practices Act to give themselves the sweeping powers to indiscriminately target anyone. The memo, Trump's memo, lays out in chilling detail what I assumed in my column, "We Are All Antifa Now," was behind the Trump administration's designation of Antifa as a terrorist group. The designation allows the state to brand all dissidents as supporters of Antifa and prosecute them as terrorists. So basically, you just call something terrorism or terrorist organization, and then you can go after anybody who has similar ideals or has ever said anything positive about Antifa or has said positive things about stuff Antifa believes, such as stopping fascism. It's a very easy, oh, well, you just connect the dots, he said the same thing Antifa says, and then it gives you a reason to arrest him. This is to be a preemptive war. It will be waged against those individuals like James Comey, John Bolton, George Soros, Reid Hoffman, and institutions, including the Democratic Party, which Stephen Miller has labeled a terrorist organization, universities and the media, which threaten Trump's absolute grip on power. And most of you know that the people listed there, James Comey, John Bolton, George Soros, are not good people. They are part and parcel of a absolutely bloodthirsty U.S. empire that has destroyed the lives of millions, both around the world and at home, considering we are the world's largest prison state. So it doesn't mean they're good people, but they're still part of the ruling elite that Trump doesn't like and that don't like Trump. So Trump goes after perhaps his most powerful enemies in many ways first. And then once he can get them out of the way or sidelined, or sometimes he'll put up test balloons to see whether they're going to push back at all, he then can go after far less significant and less powerful enemies, such as anybody doing a YouTube show that says bad things about Trump. Once these establishment institutions and their representatives are neutered, those of us on the left will be next. The memo, and notice he says, Chris Hedges says, those of us on the left to make it clear that James Comey, John Bolton, and George Soros are not left. They are part of the liberal ruling elite at best. Well, Bolton's not even liberal. He's a neocon, but still. The memo instructs federal law enforcement agencies to detain, question, and interrogate individuals suspected or accused of political violence or lawlessness. It demands the IRS strip organizations of tax-exempt status if they are seen by the state as directly or indirectly financing political violence or domestic terrorism. and report them to the Department of Justice for investigation. And that's another key aspect of this, is stripping organizations that are the funding, but sometimes even just the information that can be used by you and me to fight against these fucking totalitarian clowns. If you strip them of tax exempt status, that is, and quote unquote investigate them, that is a lot of impacts. One, obviously, it's, they lose 25, 30, maybe more percent of their income each year if they're not tax exempt. But beyond that, that fact that the government has stripped them of tax exempt status serves as a nice big red flag for other people that might help fund them. Oh, you're dangerous. Oh, you're scary. Oh, you're one of the bad people. I, of course, have had that scarlet letter on me ever since I had a TV show at RT. But they can use a variety of things to put that scarlet letter on you. It doesn't have to just be working at a certain TV station or something. There's plenty of different ways that they can try to make sure that everyone will, turn against you. That people, to this day, if you're just learning about my show and you go and you Google me, I'm sure maybe the first thing, but one of the top 3 things you're going to get is a Wikipedia entry that's filled with falsehoods about me. You're going to get a New York Times article that's filled with absolute garbage about me that's fake. And that's by design. You want to make sure that new people are not finding out about this person or this organization or this website and thinking it might be good. So, but here's a really interesting aspect of this article by Hedges. He says, I spent 2 years with the architects of our emergent fascism when I wrote my book, American Fascists, The Christian Right and the War on America. And by the way, in case you think this is put out by some Christian hater, Chris Hedges is Christian. He is an ordained pastor. So, but anyway, American Fascists, The Christian Right and the War on America. In that book, he spent months, years, he says, speaking and to these characters. And he says, they do not hide their vision for America. They plan to make the legal system subservient to dogma. We've seen that with Donald Trump, right? They hate the secular humanist society based on science and reason. And this is very important in the attacks on science you've seen recently. They want to, and it's not just them, there are others as well. I don't know if I guess he would put Peter Thiel and Musk in this kind of Christian right, the right group that wants to create a totalitarian Christian right, Christian nationalist government. But Peter Thiel has led the attack on funding people who basically just create enough doubt about science that no one knows what's up and what's down, and scientists are all evil. And that is really an important aspect of this. They dream of making the 10 Commandments the basis of the legal system, which is hilarious because if you read the 10 Commandments recently, have you looked at them? Just about all of them not illegal right now. Like, you can totally covet your neighbor's ass. Not only can you covet your neighbor's ass, you can Jesus, why can't I say covet? Fucking shit, goddamn covet. I covet those who can speak correctly. Not only can you covet your neighbor's ass, you can covet your neighbor's wife's ass, which is also in the 10 Commandments. None of those things are illegal. The only one's illegal is killing people. You still can't kill people. But all the rest, I think you're fine. Didn't respect your elders in there? Anyway, they plan to teach creationism or intelligent design in public schools and make education overtly Christian. They brand the LGBTQ community, immigrants, secular humanists, feminists, Jews, Muslims, criminals, quote unquote criminals, and those dismissed as nominal Christians, meaning Christians who do not embrace the fundamentalist interpretation, all as deviants. Do you need that list again? Let me know if any of you are on this list, because if so, I'm going to report you. Anyone who's in the LGBTQ community, immigrants or immigrant-friendly people, secular humanists, feminists, Jews, Muslims, criminals, or those accused of being criminals, even if you're not, and those dismissed as nominal Christians. Those are all deviants. These deviants are worthy not only of being silenced, imprisoned, or killed, are worthy of being silenced, imprisoned, or killed. They condemn government assistance programs, especially for the poor. And the reason for that, actually, this is also the heart of why we have paid healthcare and this expensive healthcare in this country and other countries don't, is because it's part of a eugenics effort. They do not like system, parts of the system that are like food stamps, public schools, free healthcare, anything that is given to give the poor some kind of leg up, some kind of ability to survive, because the hope by these monsters, he calls them Christian fundamentalists, but I don't know, you'd see a lot of Israel and Zionist lunatics signing up for most of this platform. But the reason they don't want any of that, like healthcare, is because it might help poor people to survive, Black people to survive, immigrants to survive, and they don't want any of that. And if you actually look at the history of universal healthcare in this country, there was a big fight. I've covered it on the show before, to create universal healthcare, free healthcare, back in the early to mid, not even mid, but mainly early 1900s. And the reason it lost was because of an effort by eugenicists to stop free healthcare, because it would help Black people survive in this country. And the hope was that Black people would die out. That's what they were. That's the reason you have high medical care, healthcare costs right now, is because of that. You have that to thank. What was the name? The guy, the German guy who's at the heart of it, Ludwig Hoffman or something like that. Frederick Ludwig Hoffman, maybe. Anyway, yeah. It's when you learn the history of this country, really, it's just a fun romp, is what it is. It's like watching a Disney movie, the history of this country. That is just a good times. There's a lot of smiles and butterflies and skippings and seesaws and jungle gyms. It's just good times. This is the history we had. Let's see. They call for the federal government to be reduced to protecting property rights, homeland security, and waging war. They want church organizations to run social welfare agencies in schools. And as we've seen, church organizations running social welfare agencies is a tiny percent of what's needed in this country to actually take care of those chewed up by our capitalist shit show. They demand the expansion of the death penalty to include moral crimes, quote unquote, including apostasy, blasphemy, sodomy. So if you're gay, you could be executed. Witchcraft. Oh, and by the way, in a lot of some of the earlier laws in states, and I think in some of them they're still illegal, or it was until recently, like Virginia. I think maybe it's changed, or maybe it's still illegal technically. But either way, it wasn't. If it is no longer illegal, it wasn't until a few years ago that sodomy was still on the books as illegal, and the way they defined it was any sexual act that's not for procreation. So that means every BJ that's ever been given or received in the state of Virginia was illegal, was highly illegal. And it goes both ways, right? Also, witchcraft as well as abortion. I mean, I consider abortion witchcraft, so let's not be redundant here, Chris Hedges. Okay, abortion is witchcraft. And abortion would be treated as murder, so therefore you could execute the mother. They call for the return to a white male patriarchy by mythologizing the past. They demand women be denied contraception, access to abortion, and equality under the law. The only legitimate voices in public discourse and the media to them are Christian. So it sounds like a great time. All of this sounds like, if all of that happens in the United States, We're in for some fun times. And the question is, do you think the liberal America will ever stand up at any point against any of this? Or do you think it's just going to be yard signs, just all the way to the end? Like, please stop executing people for blowjobs. It'll say on the little sign that they put in their front yard. Just, I'm putting this sign right here. It says, I would prefer you don't execute the blowjobbers. Please do not execute any more rug munchers. That's what the signs the liberals put out will say. Power in the age of Trump is based on blind personal loyalty. Rights are privileges that can be instantly revoked. As we saw, Marco Rubio wanted to revoke passports for thought crimes. Lies replace truth. Opinions replace facts. History is erased and rewritten. Hence why they want to erase critical race theory, the idea that race and racism is pivotal in the creation and history of America. Oh my God, they can't have that. So let's rewrite the history books. The cult of leadership replaces politics. And by the way, how much of that paragraph sounds exactly like 1984? Lies replace truth. Opinion replaces fact. History is erased and rewritten. Paranoia grips the ruling elite, composed of narcissists, buffoons, and gangsters, I call them idiopaths, who feed off conspiracy theories. They see mortal enemies everywhere and live in a hermetically sealed, non-reality-based universe. They live in a false reality, which is interesting because they're also trying to create a false reality for all of us. They want you to think there is a massive wave of left-wing violence in America when it's almost non-existent. They want you to think that there is no right-wing mass violence in America when almost all of the mass killings are by right-wingers. They want you to think that there is no U.S. military mass killing wave across America when the latest numbers show that 32% of all mass shooters are veterans of the U.S. military, and most of those, or almost all of those, are never reported by the mainstream media. That research being done by David Swanson over at World Beyond War. 32%, a third of all mass shooters are veterans or have veteran experience. Maybe I think for some of them it's like we're in ROTC or something like that, but some sort of connection to the U.S. military. Let's see here. They are creating a pseudo-democracy populated, we do not have democracy, populated by pseudo-legislators. The U.S. government does, the Congress does very little. If you look at what Congress passes, it's just whatever aligns with corporate America. Pseudo-courts, pseudo-journalists, ain't that the truth, pseudo-intellectuals, pseudo-Christians, and pseudo-citizens. Our anemic and calcified democracy, including our bankrupt liberal institutions, cannot defeat them. Fascists are the swamp creatures that rise up out of all failed democracies. And we are without a doubt a failed democracy. We do not have a democracy any longer. These things we see, like the gerrymandering fights in Texas, they are just the cutting away the remnants of what democracy there is, cutting away the last vestiges of our completely shredded and tattered democracy. Even if our federal elections were legitimate, which there's no proving they're legitimate because literally we're voting on black box machines that we can never hold accountable. So even if they were legitimate, you vote once every 4 years for the presidency. You vote once every 2 years for the House. And that's not real democracy. We're putting in place whoever it is who spent the most money on the fucking campaign. That's who gets into that office. 80% of the time in the Senate and 90% of the time in the House. And the only reason it's as low as 80 in the Senate is because of name recognition. So if you've been there 20 years, you don't have to spend as much money and you can still get reelected, which kind of doesn't even count. But so 80% You average the two. 85% of the time, the guy that spends the most, man or woman, is going to win that election. It's not a real election. It's a money-bought election. It's whoever's spending the most. And the other aspect of that fucking no one mentions except this guy is 100% of the time, the two candidates who spend the most amount of money will win the election. Meaning, if you are a third-party candidate and you do not have the amount of money that the other two candidates have, you will never, 0% chance, win the election. And that is 100% of the time the third party does not have the millions of dollars to spend on winning the election. It is a meaningless election for those who can spend the most money electing themselves. Anyway, so the question is now, after you've heard everything Chris Hedges had to say in that article, will we fucking stand up in this country? Will we fight back and join against the actual enemies, the people actually ruining your lives, the ruling elite writ large? As long as you're fighting against others, as long as you're furious about trans people or trans bathrooms, or you're furious about immigrants or whatever little segment of society, then you're just playing into there. It's exactly what the ruling elite wants. Just keep fighting. Elon Musk literally, after Charlie Kirk was killed, Elon Musk literally posted, like, everyone should rise up. You should rise up and get him. He knows he's the ruling elite. He knows the richest fucking guy in the world, or second richest now. And so he just wants us all fighting. That's good for him. Because when people aren't fighting, what are we doing? We're uniting against fucking him. We're uniting against Peter Thiel. We're uniting against Larry Ellison. We're uniting against the richest sociopaths in the world. And they can't have that. So, of course, hate trans people. Hate gay people. Hate women, for fuck's sake. Specifically non-white women. Whoo! They are the worst. Hate them all. Because then the ruling elite get exactly what they want. And can keep going with the divide and conquer. All right, folks, I am going to wrap up. I would normally do an extra segment for those of you over at localsleecamp.net, but I went till 4:15 here, so I got to run. But normally, each one of these shows to everybody at leecamp.net gets an extra segment, and you can sign up for free for a month. It's easy. Just go to support this show. Go to leecamp.net. When you sign up, scroll down and become a supporter. And then when you go to sign out, use promo code LeeCampFree, all one word, all caps. LeeCamp.net will take you to my Locals page. Locals is like a combo of Patreon and Facebook. You can post your own stuff, but you get to support my community at the same time. If you hate that idea, you can also join patreon.com/LeeCamp. Both of those are ways to support this show. This show, I got to be honest, we're struggling. YouTube crushes us more every single day. They have decreased the percentage of people that they even show this show to, like even just on the side panel. They have decreased that by 80% over the past 2 weeks. And it was already crushed to begin with. So if you want to see this show keep going, it would really be amazing if you can support us over at leecamp.net. Use code LeeCampFree. You also get my ebook, Dangerous Ideas, for free as well when you sign up. Also, it would support this show by simply listening to the podcast sometimes. The podcast is called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. It's called Moment of Clarity on all other podcast platforms. And when you do that, just click the 5-star review, whatever. Some of the platforms, there's ways to, subscribe for free so that you find out about new episodes. All that stuff helps this show. And I hope you'll consider doing those things so that we can keep going. I do this show 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, plus a new Unredacted Tonight every Thursday. So that means 4 days a week you can have a show from me. And I hope you'll just show up because they're not going to tell you about it. They're not going to alert you. We're a tiny little thing trying to hang on the corners of the internet. And I hope you will show up on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you then. Keep fighting.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in so such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha ha.